Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. I'm very excited this week to be joined by Hill Varsity's newest full-time staff writer covering the Huskers, Drake Keeler. Drake, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right, man. I'm happy to have you on. First of all, congrats on the gig.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I wanted to have you on to talk just Nebraska football in general, what you're looking forward to this season. We're going to put Nick Saban on blast in a little bit. Before we get to any of the football stuff, though, I just introduce yourself to the audience. Introduce yourself to the it's probably small. It's probably a small group of Hail Varsity fans that listen to this podcast every week, but just introduce yourself to them. Who are you? Give them a backstory, what you're most looking forward to with this job.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've been around for a little while, kind of around Nebraska, at least. I'm a recent graduate at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I worked at the Daily Nebraskan for my first 3 years as a sports reporter, then sports editor. Also started a diversity inclusion board during that time. And then this last year, my senior year of college, I was an intern at Hail Varsity, writing on football and other sports. And now they've picked me up full time. So I'm happy to be here and be sticking around Lincoln.
Yeah, happy to have you. Congrats. You've been on the podcast a couple times, but I don't remember how long ago it was. I'm pretty sure we talked about the DEI stuff that you had going when you were at the Daily Nebraskan. I'm pretty sure that was one of the things that we had you on. That was impressive. That was impressive. I just have to say, because you get, my student journalism experience in college was just I don't want to do something that's going to have people talking about me. I just want to write stuff.
I get
and that. You were like, nope, we've got an opportunity to do something here. So good job.
Right. Thank you.
So Nebraska in 2022, you're coming in at an excellent time. Yeah. It's potentially the last year of a coaching staff, and then you're going to have to deal with a coaching staff change. Or it's the start of something cool in that Nebraska kind of flips this around and gets rolling again. I guess what are some of the things that you're most looking forward to this upcoming season with Nebraska football?
I mean, kind of just, everything. There's a lot of new stuff going on between all the new offensive assistants, new quarterback, which I haven't, since I've been in Nebraska, I've only seen Adrian Martinez. And even the defense lost a good amount of guys. So while they're probably going to be good, it's going to be different. So I think it feels like it's an uphill battle for this to work, but there's the road is there, the chance is there, and I'm very interested to see how it plays out.
So DraftKings has preseason win totals out, and they've had them out for quite a bit. So I don't know if this is what it opened with, or if this is the current line, but Nebraska's win total is at 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
You can get plus 100 value taking the under, you're minus 120 taking the over. I'm gonna put you on the spot right now. At 7.5, you going over? Or you going under?
Under. I feel a lot
under.
Yeah, I feel a lot more comfortable with the under, and that isn't even that bad because 6 or 7 wins feels achievable. And I think they can do that, but I don't know. It feels like it's going to take a lot for me. It's hard to be convinced about over on 7.5.
That's fair. Yeah, I think 7.5 is a good number.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw it at first, because you're exactly right. You can get play at 7 and get the under, because it kind of feels like 7 to 8 range is where they're going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And 8 sounds absurd as I say it, as I'm just thinking about all of the Nebraska football teams that I experienced. 8 sounds absurd, but there's a fair amount of talent there,
right.
Specifically on the offensive side of the ball, which I'll be curious to see kind of what your take is on Mark Whipple and this new quarterback, because I saw Big Game Boomer this week had his top 50 offenses entering the 22 season. Old Dominion was in the top 50. Nebraska was not in the top 50. And I just kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know what? Nebraska was 18th last year in success rate, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska was a top 25 offense in terms of moving the ball. We're not a top 25 offense in terms of finishing possessions and scoring the football, but they were a top 25 offense in terms of moving the ball. And it'll be very interesting to see this season as we get Kansas State, Adrian Martinez, how well he can perform in the Big 12, how well he can perform against defenses that are pretty good, not Big 10 caliber, but pretty good. And because I think we're going to get a ton of this was either Adrian Martinez's fault or this is Scott Frost's fault. And I'm not looking forward to that. That is one of the things I'm not looking forward to this season is the constant, like, okay, what did Adrian Martinez do this weekend versus what did Nebraska do this weekend? So who's more to blame for what happened prior? And we're going to base it off of each week's performance.
Yeah. It's not even like a discourse worth having because they're just like so much different for both of them that it is. If Scott Frost has a good year, he's had a lot change, and that doesn't necessarily make it Adrian's fault. Maybe like I think you could. Let's say Nebraska does well this season. I don't think I'd feel comfortable saying they wouldn't do that well with Adrian Martinez still here, right? Because there's just like so much more to it than that.
I'm looking at HailVarsity.com, and I see the 10 most intriguing Huskers series is rolling.
Yeah.
The most recent one, which was published Thursday. We're recording this on Thursday, by Brandon Vogel, Teddy Prohashka, and Turner Corcoran. You get a 2-for-1 at number 4. If you were writing this list, you don't have to rank. You don't have to give me 10 names. Who are a few names that you would have on your list of most intriguing? They don't have to be ranked. They don't have to be in any kind of order. But who are a couple names that just immediately jump to mind?
Yeah, I think I would put probably a couple of linemen in there just because that is the group where I think people are really curious about, maybe most skeptical about on the offense because that's where they really need improvement. And, the offensive line coach hire probably was one people were like less confident in relative to the others. And that doesn't mean he won't do well. But I think those are really intriguing positions. Other than that, maybe some running backs like, Ramir Johnson or Anthony Grant, see if the running back position can finally figure itself out because last year was a whole mess of players starting one week, like a different player was starting every week and until like the last stretch of the season. And I think, and then of course, Casey Thompson because he's the quarterback. So that's got to be intriguing. But those are some positions generally and names I'd throw in there.
You think Casey Thompson eventually wins the starting job?
Yeah. I guess I haven't really considered like the other possibilities, but I'm not saying it's a lock, but I feel like he does.
After what we saw in the spring, do you think like what percentage chance do you think we get into the season and there are multiple quarterbacks rotating, or maybe even just 2 quarterbacks rotating? Like what percentage chance would you put it at?
I want to say low. Maybe like 20. I don't know. I feel like it's pretty low just because how it went in 2020, and I don't think they want to try that again. If it happens, I guess like I wouldn't be too surprised, but it doesn't feel like it's going to happen again.
I think if they're going to do it, the schedule kind of sets up in a way that would facilitate a rotation early on, at least through the first quarter of the season, because you play Northwestern, you play North Dakota, you play Georgia Southern. You can kind of try to figure out what you have at quarterback before you get to that Oklahoma game on September 17th. If they're going to do it, but that's interesting that it's not, a non-Casey Thompson quarterback starter is not a scenario that you have considered. I wouldn't think that you're alone in that. I would think that there's a lot of people that think that it's kind of just a foregone conclusion that Casey Thompson is going to be the starter, but it is interesting. And, as I looked at a couple other quarterback rooms around the country that have 4 scholarship quarterbacks in them, I wonder what happens to that room. and I think I've talked about this on this podcast before, but I wonder what happens to that room. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they manage the first 2-3 weeks of the season, how they manage sort of the last couple weeks of fall camp in terms of, officially naming a starter, even if, there might be a situation where we get into fall camp and even at the outset, there is a de facto starter.
Right.
He just hasn't been named.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how this coaching staff handles it. What do you make of Mark Whipple, his addition for Scott Frost? We're just kind of going rapid fire here as I try to get your feel for this team going forward.
I feel like it's a good hire. He did well at Pitt, and I think he can do well here. The pieces have been in place for Nebraska talent wise for a little while now, for the most part. But I think he's got the tools to succeed. He's got the experience to succeed. Whether it actually happens is just something that I can't believe until I see it, just based on precedent for the last 4 years in Nebraska. But it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel good about it. I'll say that.
Mickey Joseph as a Broyles Award finalist. What are the odds it happens in the next 3 years?
Decent. I mean, I wouldn't say out of the odds you've given me so far, I'd say it's probably like one of the higher ones.
Has there ever been a position coach that won the Broyles Award, or does it usually go to coordinator? I think it usually goes to coordinators, but yeah, I feel like there may be a position coach. I think Bill Beatenbaugh won it at one point as an offensive line coach. Man, there's a lot of excitement about Mickey Joseph. Have you gotten to talk to him in person? I guess were you around in the spring? Have you talked to him in person? Like, what were your takeaways from just hearing him?
He seems like a great guy. It seems like he, again, is in a position to succeed. And I think, like, if the offense does pick up a lot, especially in the passing game, he's going to get a lot of credit, and he probably should. So,
okay, let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Of the 3 levels, which group are you most confident in? Secondary, linebackers, defensive line?
That's hard. I want to say, I don't know. It's kind of, I think I really like the linebackers, specifically Luke Reimer was just really good last season. I really enjoyed watching him, so I might be most confident in that group, but the secondary definitely is right up there too, because they were really strong last season. They lost a few guys, but they have the talent. Travis Fisher's been good while he's been here, and they could make a good argument for the strongest.
Yeah, I mean, if you're betting on depth, I mean, your Travis Fisher has to be pretty high on your list just because of the way that he's sort of built this room up and the way that he's sort of facilitated development within that room. So you didn't mention the defensive line. Is it concern over the defensive line, or just there are question marks? Because there are a lot of question marks, but is it just you're in wait and see mode, or is there concern?
Yeah, wait and see mode. I think, they'll be fine, probably, at least. That's the biggest wild card, I think, where you just gotta wait and see. But I just feel more confident right now in the other position groups.
That's fair. When USC comes to the Big Ten and Nebraska gets to play USC for the first time, is it going to be weird? Are you excited about this move, or do you think that this is just very, very strange for the Big Ten to add 2 Los Angeles teams?
Kind of both. It's strange, but it's like exciting because it's weird. It's exciting because it's weird. Weird stuff in college football is fun to watch. I don't know if it's like the best thing, but it will be interesting to see how it goes. And it's going to be weird watching those types of games for the first time as a conference game. But we'll see.
What was your initial reaction when you saw that USC and UCLA are coming to the Big Ten? What was your reaction?
I was really surprised, and then I was like, is this really gonna happen? And then it moved very fast, and it's like, yep, this is happening. So yeah, it's crazy. It was very very strange news, very strange day, but it's fun.
Are you a fan of this kind of super conference notion, or do you wish that we would kind of just slow down? Because like as we move into this era where Fox and ESPN are sort of dominating kind of what happens from a conference realignment standpoint, we're getting two conferences.
Right,
The SEC has said that they were, through sources that they want to stick at 16 teams. The Big Ten is reportedly just kind of sitting with what it has right now as it waits for Notre Dame. But there's a lot of speculation that these two leagues are going to get to 20 teams. And if they get to 20 teams each, I mean, that's, what, 60% of, former Power Five programs added in
right,
there. There's going to be sort of a consolidation of power at the top of the sport. And with NCAA reorganization lately, an expanded college football playoff, like we're trending toward an environment where if you're in the Big Ten and you're in the SEC, you have a chance to play for the college football playoff. And if you're not, you don't.
right.
Do you think that that's good for college football?
Probably not. It feels like we're going that way. I don't know how long it'll be. It could come pretty quickly. Could take a little bit longer. But I think I'm less passionate about it than other people. I'm more like, okay, this is happening, and we're going that direction. But I really liked what it's been for the last few seasons with all Power Five conferences for the most part having a shot. And it's less interesting to me if it's just two super conferences, but we'll have to get used to it.
We're getting the professionalization of college football. We're getting the AFC and the NFC. That's what we're getting.
Right.
Maybe it's the sort of American and National. Maybe it's the Atlantic and Pacific. Maybe the
Right.
North Football League. And I don't know how do you get South to fit into the AFC acronym? Can you? Is there a way, or would it just be the SFC, NFC, and the SFC?
Yeah, it might have to be SFC.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
Nick Saban did an interview earlier this week where he said it feels like super conferences are here to stay. And like as you kind of look at this play out, like if the Big Ten adds Notre Dame and then comes back and maybe adds a Big 12 school or two, or adds I don't know, Duke and North Carolina from the ACC, if those teams can find a way out of their grant of rights agreement, or maybe it adds Oregon and Washington. Um, you know, the SEC has to do something, because I don't think that's a strong league, but I don't think you want to be sitting at 16 if the Big Ten is going to 20, because then you're maybe they do, maybe they don't care. I don't know. Maybe they don't care. The SEC is a ridiculous league, and it also doesn't have a Rutgers or Illinois or Indiana. Like, yeah, Vanderbilt's in there, and Vanderbilt sucks, but like you could take the number 3 team in the SEC in one of the divisions and put it in the Big Ten, and it would probably finish number 3 in the Big Ten. You could take the number 3 team in the Big Ten, which I guess in the West would it be Minnesota or Purdue? Put them in the SEC. It's not going to go well.
Right.
It's not going to go well. One other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, 247 Sports came out with its blue chip ratio this week, which is a thing that Bud Elliott has done at 247 Sports for like 10 years now, I want to say. At least a decade, where it looks at the percentage of 4- and 5-star players that you have signed in the last 4 classes. It doesn't look at walk-ons. Transfers are not included, as he tries to figure out sort of how to work transfers into the equation. So it's just signees. And if that guy signs an LOI and then, doesn't academically qualify and ends up at the JUCO ranks or something, he still counts because it was signed.
Right.
So the top 15 teams in this blue chip ratio from Bud Elliott, 247 published this on Wednesday, are the teams that he deems talented enough to compete for a national title. Now, some of the bottom teams on this list, Auburn, Miami, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon. Those are the bottom 5. None of those teams are winning a national title.
Yeah.
The top of the list, though, is very, very interesting because the top of the list is the usual suspects. I don't think you've seen this, so I want you to guess the top 3 teams. You don't have to guess the order, but just guess the top 3 teams on the list.
Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson, or Ohio State.
Bingo. There you go. Yep. Alabama is at 89%.
Yeah.
89% of signees in the last 4 years. So we're talking about at least 100 players. 89% of them have been 4 or 5-star players. Ohio State is at 80%.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia is at 77%. After those 3 teams, there's a bit of a drop-off. Oklahoma's 4th with 71%. Texas A&M is 5th with 70%. Oklahoma's not winning a national championship. Right. Apologies to the Sooners fans. Oklahoma's not winning a national championship in a first year under Brent Venables, especially not with – I'm not going to say that. People are going to get mad. Oklahoma's not winning a national championship. The top 3 teams, one of these 3 teams is winning a national championship in 22. He has historical data for each of the last 11 national champions. Alabama in 5 years on this list has never had a blue chip ratio below 71%. Mm-hmm. Ohio State, when it won the title in 2014, was at 68%. Georgia, when it won the title last year, was at 80%. Just as we are seeing a consolidation of power in conferences, we're also seeing a consolidation of recruiting talent with teams. And I think I said on this podcast like a year or 2 ago, when NIL activity started ramping up, this has the potential to be a playing field leveler or go the complete opposite direction and just further widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And if there aren't going to be guardrails, maybe I didn't say this, maybe I'm just giving myself too much credit, but it feels like it would be common knowledge. If there aren't guardrails, then it can surely further the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And NIL has helped Nebraska.
Yeah,
I think NIL will continue to help Nebraska, and we're seeing it. We've seen it help other sort of teams that were excellent in the pre-Saban era that have sort of fallen off. We've seen it help those teams sort of try to recapture old form, and I'm specifically thinking of Miami, who, by the way, lands on this list at 55%. At the same time, for a team to have a roster that's 89% 4- and 5-star players, I don't think that's good for the sport. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I think NIL and all that has been, a net positive, maybe by far, just because providing the athletes with the opportunity to make money off their name, image, and likeness. But at the same time, for competition's sake, it has, kind of widened that gap in some ways. And a team with 89% blue chips that's pretty crazy, because that 90%, 9 out of 10 players, that's a lot. So yeah, that's not great.
And when you look at that, you can confidently assume, without diving into their numbers, that the 11% of players that were not blue chips were either really close to it, really close to that 4-star cutoff, or they were the type of guys that are unranked coming out of high school that, the team that actually looks at them is like, why is this person unranked? And then signs them, or why are they a 2-star? And then signs them, and that player goes to the NFL. It's one of those two guys. So the remaining, it's not like the remaining 11% of the roster is players that would go play for Wyoming. The Wyoming's too deep, right?
Yeah.
And so, I want to read you this quote from Nick Saban, who went on the Always College Football podcast with Greg McElroy, ESPN, earlier this week. And he was talking about just all of the change in college football. So here's the quote. "My biggest concern is competitive balance. the NFL, which I was involved in for 8 years, every rule they have is to create competitive balance. And if they could have every team go 8-8, so at the end of the season, every team was playing their last game to get into the playoffs, they would be ecstatic. Because how much fan interest does that create? We don't have any guardrails on what we're doing right now. We have no restrictions on who can do what. Some people are going to be capable of doing certain things. Other people aren't going to be capable of. But the bottom line is we'll lose competitive balance, which everything we've always done in college football is to maintain competitive balance. Same scholarship. Everyone had to play by the same rules, whether it was recruiting or whatever. Right now, that's not how it is. Buddy, you have not been playing by the same rules as Nebraska. Like, we do not have competitive balance. And to hear Nick Saban say this week, and then 2 days later, the blue chip ratio comes out, was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And this has happened a handful of times with some of these coaches. Nick Saban, in this instance, I'm thinking of Lincoln Riley talking about transfer portal reform.
Yeah.
How do you feel about these coaches that game the system that then come out and say we need to fix the system?
Yeah, it's the funniest thing because you know, every time you hear a quote from a college football coach, half the time it's like the most not self-aware thing ever. And this is one of these. And everything you mentioned is, you know, kind of like that. And it's like this is coming from you, you know. The criticism might have some merit, but like you are the one doing this, right? So yeah, I mean, I feel the same way you do. It's funny to hear that, and for these things to come so close.
They do not have Nebraska on here. I'm sure if you went and asked like Michael Brunts, hey, what's Nebraska's percentage? You could probably get it, but they don't have Nebraska on here. And I'd be curious to see what Nebraska's percentage is, because it's not like Scott Frost has necessarily struggled to recruit. I mean,
Right.
I can't remember off the top of my head what the class ranked last year, but he's signed top 25 classes, and there was talent on the roster
Yeah.
that remained whenever he got here. So I'd be curious to see what it is. But it is interesting to look at this list because you see Alabama at 89% as the top team in the country, Ohio State at 80%, Georgia at 77%. And then the drop-off is incredible. There's 131 FBS teams in college football for the 22 season. The number 1 team has an 89% blue chip rate. The number 15 team has a 54% blue chip rate. Like, that's jarring to see it like that. And I'd be very curious to see what Nebraska's percentage is. So if somebody at home that's listening to this knows it off the top of their head, tweet it angrily at me and tell me I'm dumb for not knowing it. But I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see what it is, because I'd be curious to see how far away from this sort of you have the talent to compete for a national championship threshold Nebraska is.
Yeah.
How close would you think they are? Just off the top of your head.
I don't know, because you know there's been so much talent going in and out. But I don't know. I feel like I'm either gonna like overestimate or underestimate it. You know, I don't know. Hold on.
So Nebraska did not sign a top 25 class last year. They signed the 41st ranked class. They had 18 commits. They only had two 4-stars.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be the key for guys like Mark Whipple, for guys like Mickey Joseph, for some of the incoming coaches, the newcomer coaches on the staff. My brain is all messed up today. This is going to be the key. You have to turn some sort of negative narratives around. You've got to flip some of that stuff.
Yeah. And
you've got to take some of these players and develop them into all Big Ten talent. And Nebraska is, you know, as we talk about the blue chip ratio and sort of the top of that, like Nebraska's not close to that threshold.
Yeah.
Now, from a percentage standpoint, I think maybe 40%, Like that's
Yeah.
kind of where my brain was thinking, which might land them, maybe middle of the pack in the country.
Right.
But if you're talking about, where Nebraska's at now, how close is it to contending for a national title? Not close.
No.
And this season becomes, not becomes, it's already important, but this season is so important in answering the question of, can Scott Frost be the guy that bridges that gap? Can
Right.
Scott Frost be the coach that gets them closer? Can this coaching staff be the staff that gets them closer? Because I guess as you've looked at, you said that you've seen Adrian Martinez your entire college career. As you've looked at this team since Scott Frost inherited it, has it gone forward or has it gone backward?
It's hard to say because, like, in some instances, it's gone forward. Again, all 8 of their 9 losses were by 1 score last year, but it's hard to say there's forward progress just based on the records. I think there's the perfect opportunity for it. Like, let's say this next season goes to plan, and maybe the next 2 after that. That there is the opportunity for a lot of progress. The coaches are in place. There's enough talent to where they can grow a lot. We've seen that this has a potential to be a pretty good team in the Big Ten. I'm not saying they'll be at a national championship level within the next few years if everything breaks right, but like they can improve a lot. It's so overall. I mean, they've maybe stayed like stagnant from where they were before Frost, but there's a lot of potential to advance and progress a lot.
Sure. Yeah. I'll be very curious to see how it plays out, and as we watch it play out, make sure that everybody that is listening to this at home is reading HailVarsity.com, because HailVarsity.com will now feature Drake Keeler much more frequently on the website. So go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe. Use the code Varsity in all caps to make sure that you are signed up for premium online content and the magazine. Get it done. Drake, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was good to talk to you. We'll have you on much more moving forward. Now that you're the full-time guy, congrats once again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
We'll be back next week with another one. Can't talk. In the meantime, keep reading HailVarsity.com. Go follow Drake on Twitter. Drake, what's your Twitter handle?
Just Drake Keeler. Drake, and then Keeler. So.
Go follow him on Twitter. It's a good follow. Also, shouts to you guys for listening to this podcast every week. Shouts to Cam for producing every week.